What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the very first episode of the Treywon Maddox show. Now, if you're watching this video and you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I love to talk ball. But ever since I started covering the sport of college football, I've gone on my way to make sure I don't show any bias in my content. And ever since I started doing that, I'm not gonna lie, I don't enjoy having conversations about the sport with biased people. And not only that, I really noticed that there is a lot of toxicity in the college football community. So I created the Treywon Maddox show to kind of be a college football Switzerland. I envision the Treywon Maddox show to be something that you could listen to on your way to work, while you're working, or just as a way to unwind. And listen to me talk about the sport that we love so much without hearing biased or me just saying stuff for attention. Now that I got all that out the way, I want to talk about our first topic, which is head coach for Penn State, James Franklin, and the allegations that the University of Penn State is facing. So to sum it all up, the former director of athletic medicine, Scott Lynch, is pretty much suing the program for wrongful termination. Essentially, he stated that he went head to head with head coach James Franklin a number of times about him not medically clearing players that James Franklin wanted him to medically clear in order to play in games. So now that I have given some insight and some context on that situation, I'm going to go ahead and give my opinion on it based on the things that I know so far. So the way that I feel about this is that I won't be like, okay, James Franklin is the worst person ever, because we know that this probably happens a lot in all kinds of sports, from the high school level to the college level to the NFL level, which is why even the NFL, a few years ago, I think 2011 actually, they started hiring private people to diagnose concussions and any kind of like head trauma and certain injuries that aren't affiliated with those organizations that they're working with, because you don't want to leave any room for intimidation. You don't want to leave any room for, okay, if you don't clear this player, we're going to lose games and you may lose your job. So I think that the NCAA should take some kind of similar approach when it comes to this. Now, it's a lot easier to govern 32 NFL teams than it is like 126 to 27, 120 something plus FBS college football programs. But I think we have to do something to fix this issue. At the end of the day, a head coach's job is to win football games, and that's what James Franklin is trying to do. But also, when you're recruiting these players and you're telling their families you're going to take care of them, you're going to develop them not only as a player, but also as a young man, as a human being, you're telling these parents that you're going to take care of their children. And I feel like if James Franklin isn't doing that and he's going out his way to put his needs of winning above the needs of the health of these players, I do think that he should be punished. Next, I want to talk about Clemson head coaches Dabo Sweeney's stubbornness to look towards the transfer portal. There are only four FBS programs, who have yet to take in a single transfer in the 2024 cycle. Army, Air Force, Navy, notice the trend here, and fourth, the Clemson Tigers. So the Clemson Tigers have yet to bring in a single transfer portal signee in the 2024 cycle. Now, obviously, I don't think that this is a crazy thing that's just like, whoa, he needs to be fired. But I don't think it's a great thing. You have to realize that college football is changing. It's not going to be always you're going to have a player for 3 to 4 years and he's going to go straight to the league, and you're going to have a class that you bring in, and that class that you bring in, they're going to stay, and those are going to be the exact same guys who are going to win you a national championship in 2 to 4 years. I think that you're going to have those key guys who stay. You're going to have guys who leave and go to other programs. And each year, you're going to have to bring in at least 2 to 3 guys from the transfer portal in order to kind of make the roster work, especially now in a day and age where we're going to have a 12-team college football playoffs, which means if you want to make it to the national championship, there's a potential that you could play, I think, like 17 games. You can play, yeah, 12 games. If you're like if you're a non-group of four school now, a power four school, if you're a non-power four school, so say you're in the American Athletic Conference, you play 12 games, you have the conference championship, that's 13 games right there. Then you may have to play 4 playoff games to get to the Natty. That's 17 games right there. You're gonna need that depth. You're gonna need depth. You're gonna need depth at every single position. And also, you're gonna have to understand that even if it's during the middle of the season in November, when that first transfer portal period opens, you're gonna have guys who are gonna leave your team in the middle of the season because they're not getting playing time. And though I do think that outside of Kirby Smart and maybe a Dan Lanning, Dabo Sweeney has the most job security in the country. He's won 2 national championships in the last 10 years. He also was able to keep Clemson relevant this entire time. Even when they're not in the college football playoffs and the national championship, they're consistently in the ACC championship or competing at the top of the ACC. He also is able to bring in top 25 recruiting classes every single season. So he's kept Clemson a relevant program. I think that he has an extreme amount of job security, which kind of causes him to kind of be stubborn in some ways, because he sees like, okay, this way has worked for over 16, 17 years that he's been at Clemson. So he thinks it's going to still work into this next generation of college football, but I'm not sure it will. Now, pump the brakes. I'm not saying that Clemson is about to fall off a cliff and be like 7-5 every single year, but I am saying that attrition sets in. If you just outright refuse to look to the portal every single year, you're gonna fall behind in college football. It's a quote that I hear that I always love it when I hear it. It says, "If you fight progress for so long, you're gonna find yourself on the wrong side of history." And I do think that if Dabo Sweeney continues to be stubborn and doesn't even try to look towards the transfer portal in certain situations, the Clemson Tigers as a football program can fall behind. Is it fair to doubt Kalen DeBoer? Something that I'm consistently seeing on social media and when I watch these talking heads of college football is that a lot of people are expecting Alabama to take a major step back as a program now that Nick Saban has retired and former Washington head coach Kalen DeBoer has taken over as head coach. The 2 major arguments that I've heard the most consistently in terms of why Kalen DeBoer can't succeed at Alabama is, 1, people are saying that he can't recruit the South, or at least he can't recruit the South anywhere as well in comparison as to what Nick Saban has been able to do. And the second argument that I'm hearing is that he can't compete in the SEC. Now, as far as the can't recruit in the South thing goes, we'll see how that comes to fruition. This is very early in the process, so we'll see over the next couple of years how he's able to recruit in those southern states. But as far as people saying that he can't compete in the SEC, I disagree with that off of rip just because of his resume so far. Now, I don't think that there are very many people who can logically say without bias that the SEC isn't the best conference in college football. And it's going to be hard every single year to fight to get to the top of that conference with Georgia every year. You got Texas and Oklahoma in conference now. You also have LSU, Ole Miss, programs like that who are trying to get to the top of the conference, clawing and scratching every single way. But Kalen DeBoer has proven that he's able to rise to the occasion. Let me give you some numbers. Kalen DeBoer, as a head coach at the University of Washington, was 25-3 with a national championship appearance. Now, his first year at Washington in 2022, he went 11-2. He parlayed that by going 14-1 and making it to a national championship in 2023. Now, at his first head coaching stop in Fresno State, he improved from going 3-3 in 2020 during the pandemic to going 9-3 the very next year in 2021. From there, he was offered the head coaching position at Washington. Obviously, you're going to leave Fresno State to go to Washington. So he was going from a group of 5 conference to being in the Pac-12, a much bigger and much more talented conference. So people probably thought, okay, he'll probably take a couple steps back have to take a few years to build up Washington. Nah, first year 11-2, next year 14-1, and went to a national championship. So that was the leap from going to a Group of 5 program to going to a Pac-12 program. Now, obviously, the SEC is the best conference in football, and that's not very comparable to the Pac-12. It's not going to be like a seamless jump, but he did go from Group of 5 level of football to Power 5 level of football and was very successful within the first couple of seasons. Yes, it may not be the largest sample size in the world, but Kalen DeBoer has proven that he can rise to the occasion. And since we're talking about conferences, I'm going to go ahead and give you my post-spring conference title game predictions. And I'll also give you a post-fall camp predictions video. But let's start in the SEC. As of right now, I have the Georgia Bulldogs coming in at 10-2 at worst, going against the Texas Longhorns. And in that game, I have the Bulldogs taking care of business. Next up is the ACC. I have Florida State coming in at 11-1. And they'll be facing the Clemson Tigers, who come in at 10-2. And in that game, I have the Seminoles coming out on top. From there, we'll go to the Big 12, where, and this is a hot take, I have Arizona coming in at 11-1. And they'll be facing Utah, who's also 11-1. And in that game, I've got the Wildcats coming out on top. And last, but certainly not least, I have the Big 10, where I have Ohio State coming in at 11-1. And they'll be facing the team who beat them, the Oregon Ducks, at 12-0. And in that game, I have Ohio State getting their get back and winning the Big 10 championship. And once again, that is my post-spring predictions, and I will be updating that following fall camp. Now, one of the things I'm excited about the most this summer is the release of EA College Football 25. Everybody's excited about this game. Everybody's talking about the programs are going to rebuild and turn them into the next big dynasties and beat Alabama and Georgia's and all this. So I'm going to tell you my top 5 programs that are untapped gold mines. Now, coming in at number 5, I have Toledo. Now, Toledo is perfect because it's about 30 minutes from Detroit. So it's closer to Detroit, Michigan than it is to Columbus, Ohio. So you can start a rivalry with Michigan. You can start a rivalry with Ohio. You're in Ohio. Right now, they play in the MAC conference. You can dominate the MAC conference for a couple years, then move up and end up playing in the Big 10 with the big dogs. Toledo's in Northwest Ohio. So imagine scheduling Michigan, Ohio State, and playing against Notre Dame every year, and then joining the Big 10 and playing against Oregon and Washington. Like, imagine that schedule. I think Toledo would be a great team for you to potentially think about for your college football rebuilds. At number 4, I'm going to go with Houston. Houston has everything you can think of in terms of having fun with the rebuild. You're going to have dope uniforms. You're playing in Texas. Obviously, one of the best states to recruit in, who has some of the best talent. You can get into recruiting battles against Texas. You can get into recruiting battles against A&M with their unlimited NIL. You can form rivalries against those programs. And honestly, I think that Houston would be like one of the best. Like, think about like the city of Houston and what you can kind of generate in terms of NIL once you turn that team to a contending program. At number 3, I have UNLV. Now, UNLV has the drip. They're out there in the Mountain West. So you can recruit those guys in Nevada. You can recruit those guys in Arizona, those kind of states, parts of Texas. You can develop that program and then eventually leave the conference that they're in. You can go and join a Big 12. And I think that UNLV being in Las Vegas will be able to provide some kind of NIL opportunities if the video game works that way. I know they said that there will be NIL involved and the transfer portal involved. You can grab some of those transfer portal guys to leave like Arizona State, Arizona, and really turn those guys into gems. At number 2, I have UCF. Now, UCF, you're in Florida. Florida is one of the most talented states in the country as far as football recruiting. You can go and grab and compete with Florida, Florida State, Miami, year in, year out for these recruits. Right now they're in the Big 12. You can freaking run the Big 12 with them in a few years. UCF, they got some good uniforms. We know they have great uniforms. I'm actually wondering how many uniforms will be included in the game since they have so many good uniforms. And people were saying, I think in 2017 or 2018, that they were the real national champions because they won every game. So let's put that to a test and go actually win a national championship with UCF. And at number 1, I have Georgia Tech. Now, think about what Deion Sanders is doing at Colorado, of all places. Boulder, Colorado. Who's out there? Now, think what he could do in a city like Atlanta, Georgia. Think about what you can do in a city like Atlanta, Georgia. You'll have the NIL backings once you show that you can be a serious program. You're in one of the, if not the most talent-rich states in terms of football recruiting in the entire country. You're in Atlanta. You got the uniforms. You got the prestige that you can build up. You can start. You're in the ACC also, too. So you can eventually build that team into a contender with Florida State and Clemson. Take over the ACC. You can build a rivalry, which the rivalry is already there, but you can level the playing fields in the Georgia rivalry. Then, if you can consistently go toe-to-toe and consistently beat Georgia, what's stopping you from going to the SEC? I think that Georgia Tech is one of the, if not the best and the most interesting programs to rebuild in EA College Football 25. But comment down below what program you will be rebuilding in College Football 25. Now, to close out this episode, I will be giving my honest opinion as an Ohio State fan of the state of the Michigan football program. Now, off rip, as you guys already know, I hate Michigan, but I'm not one of those Ohio State fans or one of those college football fans in general who's just going to be blatantly biased just because I don't like a program. And honestly, I do think that Michigan still has a chance to be a contender in the Big Ten this season. And I'll talk about the bad in just a little bit, but let's address this defense. Now, everybody's going to say, oh, they losing everybody. They're losing so many pieces. Yes, they're losing. I think they lost about 40 plus players if I'm not mistaken. But they still have the best players on their defense returning. Will Johnson, in my opinion, is probably the best cornerback in the country. And then you can't look at Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and not think that that's the best defensive interior in the country. So if they have the best defensive interior in the country, they got to have a top 5 defensive line in the country. So off of that alone, if they can stick to their bread and butter, which have gotten them this far in the last 3 to 4 seasons, and they can have a very strong running game, they have the defense to go and be their anchor. Now, I've given you the good. Now we got to address the bad. People get so caught up in all the talent that has left. What I'm really thinking about is that coaching staff. They pretty much have a brand new coaching staff. I know they replaced most, if not all, the defensive coaches. Defensive line coach left, linebackers coach left, DB coach left, defensive coordinator left. I'm pretty sure the strength and conditioning staff even left. I'm not sure about that part, but they're replacing the whole defensive coaching staff. I do think, and this is just me being unbiased, I think they downgraded at the running back coach. Coach Hart was a pretty good running back coach. He developed Blake Corum, and he also developed Donovan Edwards. And they just got Tony Alford from Ohio State. And as an Ohio State fan, I can tell you, I don't think he's going to bring you a lot of recruiting battles, as we've seen already with Marquise end up going to Kentucky. But I don't think he'll even be developing guys that greatly either. And my main concern when it comes to this program, just as a college football fan, my main concern is, will they be able to continue to keep that security and that culture that they built up in this new era of college football? A lot of their players that were the key contributors towards that national championship season last year were seniors, redshirt seniors, some even COVID seniors. And now that you're losing that and you won't have 4, 5, 6 years to develop a player, will they still be able to get as much development out as they have been getting over the past 3, 4 years? And as an Ohio State fan, I can tell you that even though they're not great in recruiting, Michigan is one of the best developmental programs in all of college football. They get the most out of their players. But will they be able to do that with losing their best coaches on the coaching staff? Now, with all that being said, I still think that their floor this season, in my opinion, I think their floor this season is 10-2. I do have them losing against Texas. I do have them losing against Ohio State. And I do think they can lose against Oregon, but I think them being at home will play a very good advantage for them. And I don't see, between the new Big Three and the Big Ten, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan, I don't, right now, from the way everything is leveled up right now, we still got a long way to go. But as of right now, May 26, 2024, I don't think that any of these teams are going to beat both the teams that they play. So Ohio State, they can beat Oregon and Michigan. But I think if I had to choose a loss for them this season, I think they lose against Oregon. If I had to choose a loss for Michigan this year, I think they lose against Texas and Ohio State. And if I had to choose a loss for Oregon this year, I think it's definitely on the road against the national champions, Michigan. But comment down below where you think Michigan will finish record-wise at the end of the season. All right, guys, that's it for me today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more daily college football content.